Alright, so by now you've already seen the casting video that I did. So if you have your ingot maker, whatever style, and you have your initial ingot, okay, in this case we're going to do 10 karat gold, and on the rolling mill we're going to start with the widest one, and we're going to get it squared up, which is what we've already done. I took this over, I annealed it. So some basic things you want to think about when you're using the rolling mill, okay? Every bench is going to use a different size stock, okay? There's a lot of standardized stuff, but there's also items that you tend to see more often than other jewelers based on your location and what products people are buying, okay? So the important things to remember when you're doing this is always run it through the mill in the same direction, okay? So in this case, I'm going to use this end, which was actually the top, okay, because we didn't have a button on this one. I didn't fill the mold that much. So in this case, we're going to use that as the guide. Once you've annealed it, you could run it through consistently this way instead if you wanted to. I just tend to try and make it go the same way all the time, whether it's been annealed or not, okay? And so we have our initial shape. It's been my experience that I will only need maybe a small piece by the time I hit number 3 or number 4. I will only need a small piece to make into rectangular stock because I don't see a lot of those thick, heavy, chunky rings in the area that I'm in as far as the shank size, at least not in 10 karat. So I know for the 10 karat for me, I'm going to be from the number 4 spot on, and it's going to be varying types of rectangles, varying thicknesses. Very common here would be maybe a 0.7 millimeter thick shank that's 6 millimeters wide. Okay, that's really common on, say, like kiosk rings. So anyways, that's what I know that I need to roll out. Your first time doing it, obviously you're not going to know, so just go with a general standardized format. But once you get used to doing work in your area or doing your own custom work, and you know what size and style you like, you'll know what to roll it out to. And so you'll, whatever material you have, whatever quantity, you'll know that you need to divide it up accordingly to make sure that you're going to have enough for each cycle until the next time you roll, okay? So what I do, and all rolling mills are different. This particular one is a 4-to-1, I believe. So it's a pretty hard one to crank, but it was also less expensive. So just take your sizing stock. You're going to slide it in here until you can't make it go, and that's where you're going to start, right? So then, remembering that we're always going to use the same end, put it in. Give it a roll. Your first few rolls are going to be a little bit loose because of, you know, inconsistencies in the metal. Also, it just came through this way, so now when I put it through this next time, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. This was the top, now this is the top. And what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that you have uniformity of squareness. So there's our front, we have a new top. We're going to dial this down 1/4, and we're going to run it through again, okay? Nice and easy because we haven't tightened up yet. Rotate 1/4, still to the front, dial it down, and now we're starting to get a bite, okay? And rotate, still to the front, 1/4 down, and what you'll notice is it starts to get harder, okay? Rotate, still to the front, 1/4 down. This is a very repetitive process. All right, now it's getting really tough. All right, so anyways, I'm going to continue on doing that until I get this down to, like I said, in my particular situation, I'll cut off a piece at number 5, I'll cut off a piece at number 4, and then I will continue on with the rest of them based on what I do here in this particular studio. You'll also notice that my particular rolling mill has 3 sizes of half round shank if you want to do that as well. It's always nice to have a little bit of that on the side. Or you can just, you know, file it and shape it by hand. You're just going to use a little more material, all right? So as a general rule of thumb that I have with this particular mill is every time I bring this down all the way and I have a square that's gone through one cycle on one size, I anneal it, okay? The last rolling mill I had, I could go 3 sizes down before I had to anneal it. And you'll know it'll become very, very difficult to start rolling. And the other thing is you'll see spalling, you'll see cracks, and you'll see it start to peel up in certain areas. If you see that, you went too far, the metal's really hard, and you're probably best to just start over, okay? So get yourself a rule of thumb based on your rolling mill to know when is the point at which you need to stop. A good indicator, of course, is that it's really hard. Even with a small turn, it's really hard to roll it through, okay? And we're gonna cover annealing shortly. Just one more small point here, okay? Let's say you rolled it through and you dropped it. Carl, how do I know where to start now? Well, you know where to start with your end, okay? But you've lost track of your rotation, right? So if you look closely, you see how wide this is compared to this one? So what you do is you pick the narrower of the two, and that becomes your new top, okay? So this one here is a little bit wider, this one here is a little bit narrower. So we start with the narrower side on the top and roll it through, and that will get us back to square. All right, so you have a 50% chance of being correct, all right, because 180 degrees out should also be another narrow spot. Just pick whichever one you can work with and get it done. Okay, let's have a brief discussion about torch tips. This particular one, okay, is called a rosebud. This is called a split or a double. This particular one happens to be a number 4. And then the ones that I use most commonly myself would be the number 4 when I'm working on smaller material, the number 5 when I'm doing ring shanks, and the number 7 oftentimes when I'm doing a heavy shank or a sterling silver shank, okay? And these are just offset ones, all right? So the thing with the torch tips is that periodically they're going to get dirty, all right? This can impact how the flame works when it's coming out, okay? The flame is controlled by the shape of the opening. So if the shape of your opening on your torch tip is not correct, you're gonna have issues with the flame and managing what you need for any specific operation. So as we can see here, this one, not so clean, okay? Sometimes people will get too close to the work, and what'll happen is you'll wind up with little specks of whatever your precious metal is on there, and you don't want that, right? So what I have here is just a stainless steel brush. You don't want to put a lot of force, you just want to be super gentle with it. And all we're going to do is clean off all this debris. You can see I'm barely putting any pressure, I'm not spinning super fast, anything like that, right? And this one right here is well over 20 years old. So the other thing is you don't want a bunch of debris going down in here. If you happen to have one of your lines plugged, just take a fine needle and you can put that in the opening. Just put it in there, give it a little spin, okay? I usually do this after what I'm gonna do next, okay? So there is an angle at the opening of each of these ports, all right? So what I do is I take either a heart burr or a setting burr, and I will very gently just go ahead and by hand give it a little spin. If you have compressed air, it's nice to blow this out afterwards from the attachment end of the line to get any debris out of there, right? If you don't, just give it a gentle tap on the bench pin, and then when it starts up, it's gonna clear it out of there, all right? So now you can see, very gently, all we did was clean up that angle and make sure that it's well formed, all right? And now sometimes if you do it too hard, you can get a burr on there as well. So we're just, again, gonna put that in there and give it a quick little spin. And this should be good to go. So let's put it to the test. We'll go ahead and get this on here.
Ready?
Hang on, Mama. We'll go ahead and get this on here and get it fired up, and you will see whether or not we did a good job, right? So, boom, on we go. And obviously, we're going to run different pressures on the rosebud. Alright, the pressures are pretty low right now. They're not up where they're supposed to be, so this is running a little bit off. But when you're using your crucible, you're going to want to be about there, okay? And I can also see that one of them still has a little something. Alright. We're going to need to adjust that one, alright? So that's how you do that. Just trial and error till you get it where you need, and then you'll be good to go. So just periodically clean them up. All right, we go. Quick cleanup, and now we're good. It's still a little bit lower than the others, but not bad. Okay. There we go. And again, the pressures are set really low at the moment. That's why it's not tuning into a nice crisp flame. So I run my rosebud at higher pressures. Like on oxygen, I will run it at about 9, and my propane at about 12 psi, and that's about what I need for doing basic casting. Any more than that, and I go to the big torch instead. My daily operating pressures for doing ring sizing, solders, so on and so forth, they run much lower. I run the oxygen at 6 psi and the propane at about 8 psi, and that seems to work pretty good. So just adjust your regulators and the pressures according to what is good for you. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to anneal. This is that 10 karat we've been working on. We tweaked the torch a little bit. I bumped up the pressures. So now we'll get this set closer to what we want. On the larger pieces, you're going to want to use the rosebud if you have it, or a number 7. You don't want it to be too sharp, right? Because this is what is an annealing flame, right? This is your application for an annealing flame, for annealing the metal. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to work this back and forth, and we're going to bring this up to a dull red, but it's not going to be really intense and bright and easy to see. So you may see this on the video, you may not. It's basically just a dull red, and then when you bring it up there, what will happen is you'll see the metal will start to shine a little bit when you're getting close, and you can raise your torch up a little bit and move it faster, okay? Because you're not wanting to melt this, you're wanting to just bring this up to a nice dull red. And once you get it there, just hold it there for a short moment. And when you take the torch away, if you're working with yellow gold, go ahead and quench it in water. If you're dealing with white gold, just set it on a metal surface and let it cool down naturally. You do not want to quench your white gold, okay? So there's that. Let me dry this off. I'm sure you heard it go whoosh when I quenched it. That's the sound you want to hear. And again, with the white gold, as you can see, the white gold is just sitting here on the bench pin, or on the bench block, cooling down, all right? And then any superficial stuff that was on the surface is going to clean off when you quench it most of the time. This is ready to continue rolling down to the next phase, as are these. I simply need to run these through the pickle and clean off any flux, and then run them through the water to rinse it off, and we can run them down through the next cycle and continue on until we get what we need for our sizing stock. Okay, so now once I get to a certain size, for example with this 14 karat, it got too long to do as one piece, so I cut it in 2. Okay, so it's a more manageable size for me to put in with my denatured alcohol and boric acid, my flux, right? So it'll fit in the container so I can coat it. But once I get down to this particular size here, which I believe is number 5 or 6 on the on my particular rolling mill, what I do is I cut off 2 smaller pieces. Okay, Now one of these pieces will stay square. The other one I save for afterwards. We're going to go back through the rolling mill. Sorry. We're going to go back through the rolling mill afterwards, and we're going to use the flat to make this into rectangular stock. So I happen to know that I use this size square stock for some rings, and corresponding to that there is a rectangular stock that's pretty close in size. It's just wider and a little bit thinner. So I have two pieces that I start cutting off. Once I reach this particular size on my particular mill, again, it's going to vary according to what you're doing, all right, but I do that with all the carats that I work with, right? So here's my 14 karat white. I've already got my two pieces. One I will set aside, the other one I will make into rectangular stock. And then of course with these, I will just continue on going down the sizes until I've got two of basically everything I do. And if I get to the end of it and I have a reasonable length left over, I will oftentimes take that last bit and I will use a draw plate, a wire draw plate, and I will make wire that I use most frequently. So usually for me, and for a lot of people, it's going to be, you're going to use 18, 20, 22, or typical prong sizes. But on my spot welder, I use 26. So I'll try to, if I have extra, I'll try to pull that down into wire, and I will try and get a video to show you that process. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with this, and like I said, once I've reached a certain spot on my particular mill and I know that's what the ring size is, I go ahead and start cutting two of each, so one can be a square and one can be a rectangle. Okay. So when we get to the last section, this is where I'm going to start measuring. Okay, like I said, there are industry standards for most ring shank sizes. All right, so I've already started rolling this one. I'm going to measure my thickness and make sure I'm there, and make sure I'm here on my width. If I need to, I can do minor adjustments on the rolling mill. This particular one happens to be good on the size that I need it to be. So I'm just going to continue doing that with the rest of these so that I have an assortment of sizes that are standardized. And like I said before, I do two of each one, right? I do one that's square and then one that I make into a rectangle. Now, if I need more rectangular stock, I can take that square and go ahead and roll that out if I get short on it or whatever. Or if I need a specialty size or anything like that, I have that square blank that I can go ahead and modify without having to recast everything. So that's why I do a square one and a rectangular one. So I always have a backup to move in whatever direction I need to make sure I'm going to have the sizing stock available for whatever I'm doing. So I'm going to measure my next one. It's still square stock at this point, and this is 2x2. I have 2x2 already in there. That's a pretty standard ring size shank, so we'll leave the square 2x2 in there, and we'll roll this out to our rectangular size, and it's probably going to be 1 by 1.5 or something like that, and I'll just work my way down. Okay.